Once we're married, it's ours anyway. By Christmas, we'll have this place listed.
To many more years of happy memories.
At my daughter's wedding, right after the toast, my brand new son-in-law stood in front of 120 guests and waved a brochure in my face. It had a photo of a smiling old man in a wheelchair, and across the top, in bold blue letters, "You're in good hands with Riverdale Retirement." He smirked and said, "We'll get you settled in by the end of the month, Tom." Laughter rippled through the tables. The DJ chuckled. Someone clinked a glass. I didn't say a word. I just stared at him. Because the man didn't know something. He had no idea what I'd done the day before. Before we continue, hit subscribe and drop a comment if you've ever been underestimated. This story will light a fire in you. I'm Tom, 58, retired Ford line worker, born and raised in Toledo, Ohio. Lived off West Bancroft, right near the Maumee River. Same 2-story house I bought in '93. Paid off the mortgage in 2014. I built every inch of that home for my daughter, Sophie. Her mother passed from ovarian cancer in 2006. From that moment on, Sophie became my world. I never remarried, never dated. I put in overtime. I packed school lunches. I showed up. Always. Back then, my hands were still strong from the line, scarred but capable. Every Christmas, I sat on the carpet with wrapping paper stuck to my socks, fighting with cheap Sears tape that split every other pull. Every birthday, I mailed cards to her college dorm with $20 bills inside. Sometimes a note scribbled in my cramped handwriting. "Proud of you, kiddo." And when she called crying about tuition going up, voice breaking, afraid she'd have to drop a class, I didn't even think twice. I cashed in my pension early, $43,800, a lifetime of overtime and calloused palms, gone with a single signature, just to keep her in school. She never knew that part. I never told her. Some things a dad just does. I met Brandon a year ago, Thanksgiving night. He arrived 10 minutes late, wearing loafers too shiny for November mud and a Rolex that screamed, "Look at me." Said he flipped real estate and didn't believe in 401ks. Called me Big T like we were frat brothers. Cracked jokes about boomers hogging property. Told Sophie she should talk to me about consolidating assets. I didn't like him, but she looked happy, eyes bright, cheeks flushed, so I swallowed it. Smiled where I should, passed the gravy, kept quiet. That night, after they left, I found a beer bottle in my garage. He'd opened my fridge without asking. Used one of my oil rags, an old thing that had belonged to my dad, to wipe his hands and never put it back, a small thing. But my gut clenched. I should have trusted that feeling. 6 months later, Sophie asked if Brandon could move in, just for a while. Said their lease was ending and they were saving for a down payment. I agreed. Of course I did. It was Sophie. I cleared. The upstairs room, the one with the big south-facing window that catches morning light. Boxed up 30 years of odds and ends, old tools, photo albums, the rocking chair my wife nursed Sophie in. I moved into the cramped guest room with the stubborn window that stuck in the summer heat. Brandon arrived with 2 massive gaming monitors, a standing desk, and an air of ownership. Within days, he'd changed the Wi-Fi name to Brand Boss. Left dishes in the sink. Borrowed my truck without asking, saying he needed to run errands. One night I walked in after a late grocery run and found him in my recliner, feet up. My last cold Dr. Pepper sweating in his hand. He glanced over, grinned lazy. "You ever think about downsizing, Big T? This house is a little much for one guy." I said nothing, just carried the groceries to the kitchen. But inside, something shifted. A gear turned. It only got worse after the engagement. Brandon became bold, careless. I caught him rifling through my mail one morning. He claimed he was just looking for the water bill. A week later, I noticed my monthly Huntington Bank statements had stopped showing up. So I drove to the branch, heart tight with suspicion, and asked for a printout. What I saw hit me like a wrench to the ribs. 3 withdrawals, each just under $5,000, all marked authorized joint access, each signed S. Morris, my daughter. I drove home numb, hands clenched on the steering wheel. When I asked Sophie, she looked anywhere but at me. Brandon said it was just to consolidate accounts, she murmured. You're getting older, Dad. Older. The word clung to the air, sour and heavy, like rust. After that, I stopped talking. I started watching. I dug a small notebook from the junk drawer and began writing things down. Times they left, packages delivered, purchases carried through my front door, dates, amounts, small details that might not mean much alone, but together, a map. A 1-200 espresso machine arrived, a Peloton, designer luggage with gold zippers, new iPhones, 2, 1 for each of them. Meanwhile, Brandon bragged to my neighbor about how I'd probably be moving into a senior condo by year's end. I was still mowing my own damn lawn. One morning, coffee in hand, I stood at the living room window and watched them on the porch. Sophie leaned against the rail, laughing softly. Brandon had an arm slung around her, phone in hand, scrolling. I saw it, the blue and white Zillow screen reflected in the glass door. He was showing her my house, its market value. She giggled at something he said. My chest went cold. This wasn't freeloading. He was planning to take over. That night, I couldn't sleep. I got in the truck and drove to the Maumee River. The old steel bridge shadowed against the moonlight, rolled the window down, let the cold slap me awake. I thought about every missed vacation, every weekend shift, every scraped knuckle and pulled muscle, all for Sophie, all so she'd never have to wonder if she was loved, if she was safe. And now, this man, turning my own daughter against me, framing me as obsolete, disposable. I pulled out my phone, opened the photo gallery, scrolled until I found it. Sophie in kindergarten, pigtails uneven, holding up a crayon drawing. Our house, boxy and crooked, but bright yellow, smoke curling from a lopsided chimney. At the top, in shaky letters, me and Daddy's forever home. I stared until the screen dimmed. Something inside me hardened. Then I started making calls. The first call was to an old friend from the plant, Ricky. He'd left Ford a few years before me and started at a small contracting business. Hey, Tom, he answered, voice warm but surprised. Been a while, I swallowed. Rick, you still got that trailer? The one you haul big stuff with? Sure do. Why? Thinking about making some changes around here. A pause, then cautious. Everything okay? Yeah. I forced lightness I didn't feel. Just time to clean house. He chuckled, not catching the weight behind the words. You say when. Next call. An old union buddy, Eddie, who now worked at a local credit union, needed advice on moving funds, closing accounts quick, without triggering notice. He asked a few questions, then lowered his voice. Tom, you protecting yourself? Something like that. Well, Eddie said, come by tomorrow morning. Bring ID. We'll talk. I hung up, chest buzzing. Not adrenaline exactly. Something heavier. Purpose. I sat in the cab for a long time, engine off, listening to the river lap against the rocks. A train passed somewhere far, horn low and lonely. For years, my life had been about building, providing, protecting. I'd been the dependable one, the fixer, the guy who swallowed pride if it kept the peace. But there comes a moment, a line that once crossed, you can't go back. Brandon had just crossed it. And my daughter, maybe she didn't see it yet, but she would. She would. The next morning, I was at the Lucas County Clerk's office the moment the doors unlocked. The lobby smelled faintly of old paper and winter coats, still damp from the drizzle outside. A heater rattled in the corner. The room was almost empty. Just me, a young couple whispering nervously as they filled out a marriage license application, and the sharp, unrelenting tick of the clock over the front desk. Each tick sounded louder than it should have, like it was counting down to something only I could hear. I wasn't there to argue. I wasn't there to plead. I was there to act. When the clerk asked what I needed, my voice came out calm, flat. A man who had made up his mind. "I'd like a property title transfer packet," I said, "and an application for a revocable living trust." The woman behind the counter blinked, clearly not expecting that combination. She was maybe 30, with a pink cardigan and hair pinned back in a messy clip, her eyebrows lifted. "Is this for an estate?" she asked carefully. I shook my head once. "No, it's for something still alive." She hesitated, then slid the forms across the counter. The paper made a crisp, whispering sound against the laminate. I paid $14.50 for the certified copies. A handful of bills. Nothing remarkable. Yet I knew as I tucked the receipts into my wallet that this small, quiet transaction could end up saving me more than $250,000 and my dignity. Outside, the sky was slate gray, the kind that promised rain but never quite followed through. My boots crunched over salt scattered across the sidewalk as I walked back to the truck. The morning air smelled like wet pavement and exhaust, cold enough to sting but not enough to freeze. Back at home, Brandon was sprawled shirtless on the back deck, sunglasses on despite the overcast sky, scrolling Zillow again on his phone. Bare feet propped on my cooler, legs spread like he owned the place. He didn't look up when I walked past him, didn't even pause whatever he was watching or reading, just existed there, in my space, without the slightest flicker of respect. Inside, Sophie sat at the kitchen counter, shoulders hunched slightly, as she tapped through centerpiece quotes on her iPad. White earbuds dangled around her neck. She looked busy, distracted, not unhappy exactly, just somewhere else, somewhere I couldn't reach anymore. I set down my keys, poured water into the coffee maker, measured grounds with the same old scoop I'd used for years. The hiss and burble filled the silence. I made 2 mugs, walked one over to her, hoping the small ritual might bridge the gap. She murmured thanks, without looking up. I sat across from her. My fingers wrapped the warm mug. I cleared my throat. "I've noticed some strange activity on my accounts," I said slowly. "I'm thinking of changing a few things." For a heartbeat, I waited, hoping she'd ask what I meant, hoping she'd look up and really see me. She didn't. Her eyes stayed glued to the screen. "Brandon says it's probably just the bank being weird," she said casually, almost rehearsed. "He knows that stuff." Then she got up and left the room. The sound of her slippers fading down the hall was soft, final. That was the moment something inside me shifted for good. The father trying to keep the peace, the man bending over backwards to make life easy, was done. What stood up in his place was someone preparing for war. The next 2 weeks were a slow, deliberate march. I drove to Huntington Bank one rainy morning. The parking lot glistened with puddles, oil swirling rainbow on the surface. Inside, the branch smelled like carpet cleaner and printer toner. A young teller with polite eyes helped me close the joint savings account. $61,200 I'd scraped together over decades. Money I'd once thought might help Sophie with her first house, or keep her safe if she ever needed it. Now it needed to be safe from her. I asked for a certified check in my name only. Watched the printer hum and spit out my future in black ink. The teller smiled as she handed it over, not knowing that check was a shield. From there, I drove across town to Navy Federal, a quiet brick building tucked behind a strip mall. The lobby was empty except for a receptionist humming to herself. I opened a new account under the freshly created trust, Morris Family Legacy Trust. My name at the top. Successor trustee clause ready to fire if I was ever gone. Brandon's name didn't appear anywhere, not even as a shadow. Next, the house itself. I met with a notary, signed papers that retitled the home into the trust. Each page felt heavier than paper, like bricks stacking into a fortress. The new deed made it clear. If something happened to me, a trusted friend, not Brandon, not anyone he could sway, would control the property. I also revoked my old healthcare power of attorney. It had Sophie's name on it. Once that felt natural. Now it felt dangerous. Instead, I gave the authority to Nate, my childhood friend, a retired sheriff's deputy who'd never been afraid of confrontation. Nate had been there when I buried my wife. He wouldn't be fooled by slick smiles or fake sympathy. The final piece was small but powerful. A $39.99 voice recorder from Amazon. Plastic, cheap, but able to hold hours of truth. I slipped it into my pocket when it arrived, turned it over in my hands like a weapon. Because this wasn't just defense anymore. This was documentation. Protection. One night, after they'd gone to bed, I padded quietly to the hallway and set the recorder on a small table just outside their door. My heart thudded the whole time. I felt almost criminal, sneaking around in my own house, but I pressed record and walked away. The next morning, before sunrise, I retrieved it and sat at the kitchen table, coffee steaming, hands trembling slightly as I hit play. Static. Rustle. Then voices. Brandon. Look, once we're married, it's our house anyway. Ohio's a marital property state. Sophie. But what if he changes the deed? Brandon laughed, a smug, lazy chuckle that made my skin crawl. He's too soft. He's never stood up to anyone. Trust me. By Christmas, we'll have this place listed. I sat frozen. The sound of their laughter upstairs had been background noise for weeks. Now it landed like knives. Around me, the kitchen was a museum of my life. The walls I'd painted with my wife in a shade called morning wheat. The dent in the hardwood from when 5-year-old Sophie dropped her first pink bike. The hand-carved M on the banister, just a playful mark I'd made moving in. They weren't just taking a house. They were erasing everything I'd built, everything that made me dad. I hit stop on the recorder, sat back, and stared at nothing. My chest felt hollow but hot at the edges. 3 days before the wedding, Brandon cornered me in the garage. I'd been sorting tools, trying to keep my hands busy while my head churned. The smell of motor oil and sawdust hung thick. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. He sauntered in, confident as ever, leaning against my workbench like he owned it, a slick grin under his neatly trimmed beard. Big T, he started, all fake warmth. Listen, after the honeymoon, Sophie and I are thinking about taking over some of the home responsibilities, financially and structurally. You've done enough. Let us take the wheel. I turned to face him, kept my expression still, neutral. He gave me the look manipulators wear, soft eyebrows, gentle concern that isn't real. You deserved a rest, man. You know, start transitioning into the next phase of life. We even toured a few places that take Medicare. Real nice ones. He pulled a glossy brochure from a folder and tapped it twice like a magician revealing a card. Riverdale Assisted Living. Safe, clean, right by a Denny's, he said with a grin. That was it. The last thread snapped. For a second, a memory hit me like a punch. 11 straight days on the Ford line after my wife died. No sleep worth mentioning. Fingers cracked and bleeding, socks stiff with dried blood from steel-toe boots. And still I came home, cooked dinner, tried to smile so Sophie wouldn't drown in grief. I'd taught her to change a tire in the rain, to stand up straight even when life knocked her flat, to fight for her space in the world. And now she stood upstairs, letting this man plan my exile like I was an outdated appliance. I didn't yell, didn't even blink. Rage burned cold and clean. Thanks for thinking of me, I said evenly. That was all. No sarcasm, just ice. I turned back to my tools. He lingered a moment, maybe thrown off by the calm, then left. When the door shut, I picked up the brochure and slid it into my growing file of evidence. The pile felt heavier every day. The day before the wedding, I finished my preparations. At the lawyer's office, a quiet manila folder grew fat with certified documents. I mailed 3 copies of the updated deed, paid for tracking numbers, watched the clerk stamp each envelope with deliberate thumps. I drafted 2 notarized letters, one addressed to Sophie, one to Brandon. Clear, formal, undeniable. Then I prepared a single USPS certified envelope. At the top of the first page, in bold, sat one simple line. You are hereby notified that you have no legal, financial, or residential claim to the property located at redacted address. Inside, I stacked the truth. The new trust papers, property transfer documents, voided checks from the closed joint account, a signed eviction warning with Brandon's name front and center. When it was sealed, I slid the envelope into the inside pocket of my only black suit. The suit still smelled faintly of cedar from the closet. I polished my shoes until they caught the dim bedroom light. Everything about the ritual felt like sharpening a blade. Wedding day. Brandon was pure performance. White teeth flashing, handshakes for everyone, calling me Pops, like we were close. His cologne hung heavy, something expensive and loud. Sophie looked radiant but far away, her smile beautiful but tight at the edges. I wanted to reach her, but it was too late for speeches. During the reception, music thumped and lights twinkled, but I stayed near the edge of the crowd, silent, watchful. My drink sat untouched. I listened as Brandon toasted to new beginnings and family leadership, milking the spotlight. Then, with all the confidence of a man who thought he'd already won, he pulled out the brochure. He raised it high, grinning wide, like a hunter showing off a trophy. By the end of the month, he announced, we're helping Tom transition into a more comfortable lifestyle. The room gave polite laughter, a few awkward claps. Some guests glanced at me, unsure if this was a joke or cruelty disguised as humor. Sophie looked down into her glass. Brandon turned, eyes glittering, grin unshaken. Right, Big T. You ready to trade that toolbox for a rocking chair? For a long moment, I didn't move. The world seemed to hush around me. The music, the laughter, all fading to a dull hum. Then I walked toward him, slow, deliberate, each step steady. I reached into my coat, felt the weight of the envelope, heavy with proof, with protection, with every ounce of love turned into steel, and I handed it to him. Brandon blinked when I handed him the envelope. At first, he didn't open it. He turned it in his hands like he was showing off a gift bag at a baby shower. His smile stayed plastered on, practiced and wide, but a flicker of confusion passed behind his sunglasses. Well, well, he said finally, holding it up so the people nearby could see. Pops wrote me a love letter. A few polite chuckles floated from the tables. He thrived on an audience. He slid a finger under the flap and tore it open with exaggerated slowness, the sound loud and sharp in the music-thick air. Some of the guests leaned in, expectant, curious. Then came the silence. He thumbed through the first 2 pages, the smirk fading just a hair. Trust documentation, proper notarized, stamped in blue. Next, the new title deed with my full signature, officially filed with Lucas County. Then the eviction notice, his name printed crisp and unmistakable in bold black ink. I watched his jaw work. A muscle twitched once, twice. He kept flipping, faster now, lips moving as he read. His eyes darted across the page, then back again like maybe he'd missed something that could save him. The laughter from the tables thinned and went quiet, as if the room itself sensed a shift. What is this? He muttered finally, his voice still trying for casual but landing closer. To a choke. I didn't answer. He held up the last page, shaking it like it might wake me up. What the hell is this supposed to mean? That's when Sophie came over. Brandon? She said softly, almost afraid to interrupt. He turned to her, voice cracking with an edge I hadn't heard before. His cool was slipping. He changed the damn deed. Moved the money. You knew about this? She looked at me, eyes wide, searching for a clue. Then back at him. No, she whispered. I didn't. And for the first time since I'd met the man, I saw fear on his face. Real, unmasked fear. Let's rewind. A month before this day, I'd sat alone in my garage under the harsh yellow of a single work lamp. The air smelled like old oil and sawdust. My laptop balanced on a scarred workbench. I scrolled through page after page of Ohio estate law until my eyes burned. Every word, every clause. I learned that marital property does not include assets placed in a properly structured premarital trust. Joint bank accounts can be closed if there's suspicion of unauthorized access. In Ohio, a property owner can serve a 30-day notice to remove non-tenants, even if they're family by marriage. I built my entire strategy on those truths. Quiet, precise, paper-proof, bulletproof, no shouting, no begging, no hoping someone would side with me, just facts, signed, filed, ready. And now, here we were, my son-in-law holding the consequences in one trembling hand, while the guests of his big day watched the mask slip. Back at the reception, the tension snapped like a rubber band. Brandon's voice rose, desperate to pull the crowd back to his side. "He's being manipulated," he blurted, half laughing. "This trust, this whole thing, is a scam. The man's got early signs of—" I cut him off. "You accessed my accounts," I said, each word slow and clean. "Lied about your intentions. Toured my home like it was a showroom." My voice was calm, too calm, cold enough to frost glass. "You're not getting a cent. You're not living in my house. And as of now, you're not welcome on my property." Gas rippled through the guests. A few stepped back instinctively as though the air had dropped 10 degrees. Brandon turned to Sophie, searching for backup. "Say something. Back me up here." Sophie's eyes flicked to mine, searching, hurting, maybe remembering. "Dad," she whispered, "is all this true?" I didn't blink. "Every word." She looked down at the floor, silent for what felt like forever. Then, slowly, she stepped away from him. No drama, no shouting, just a quiet, final move of her body. The rest of the night unraveled like a pulled thread. Brandon tried to salvage the room, but whispers spread faster than any defense he could mount. People leaned into each other, murmuring. A few glanced toward me with a mix of sympathy and respect. His parents left early, avoiding eye contact. The DJ cleared his throat, and after an awkward beat, skipped ahead to "Dancing in the Moonlight." The dance floor half emptied. I slipped outside for air, found a spot near the catering truck. The night smelled of wet grass and barbecue smoke gone cold. I wrapped my hands around a paper cup of lukewarm coffee and watched as Brandon paced the parking lot, phone pressed to his ear, shouting into voicemail after voicemail. His swagger was gone, shoulders hunched, movements sharp and frantic. His game was over, and he knew it. Later that week, the calls started. 3 times my phone lit up with his number. I let everyone roll to voicemail. On the 3rd, his voice came through, slick but cracking at the edges. "You'll regret this," he said. "Sophie will see what you did. You just split your family in half." I didn't respond. Instead, the next morning I drove to the post office, the same one where I'd mailed the deed copies weeks earlier. The smell of ink and paper hit me as I stepped in. I filed his formal eviction notice with tracking, watched the clerk stamp it with a heavy hand. 30 days per state law. I even laminated my own copy, slid it into a file folder that now felt like armor. The final line stood out in bold. "Failure to vacate will result in immediate legal action." No anger, no threats, just law. Flashback. Sophie was 19 the night she called me from Dayton. She'd gotten into a fender bender after a late shift. Her mom was already gone by then. I remember the clock glowing 11:47 p.m. when the phone rang. "Dad," she sobbed, "I don't know what to do." I didn't even take off my boots. Just grabbed my wallet and keys and drove 3 hours straight, headlights cutting through rain the whole way. My hands ached on the wheel, but I didn't care. I got there before the tow truck finished loading her car. Paid for the tow. Paid for the repairs. Gave her my car so she could get to work. Took the Greyhound back to Toledo the next morning, falling asleep against the window, smelling of oil and sweat. She never forgot that night. But somewhere along the way, she almost let this man rewrite who her father was. Almost let him erase every sacrifice. A few days after the wedding, Sophie came back to the house. She didn't knock right away, just stood in the doorway when I opened it, shoulders small beneath an oversized hoodie. No makeup, eyes puffy from crying. She looked like the little girl I used to carry upstairs when she fell asleep on the couch. "Hey," she whispered. "Hey," I said back. For a second we just stood there. The quiet was heavy but not hostile, just full of things that needed saying. "I didn't know, Dad. I swear." Her voice cracked. "He told me you'd already signed over the house, that you were tired, that you wanted to start transitioning." I nodded slowly. Didn't speak yet. Sometimes silence tells the truth better than words. She swallowed hard, reached into her bag, and pulled out a manila envelope, held it like it weighed a ton. Inside was a printed apology, hand-signed, a canceled wedding account showing she'd refunded every cent Brandon had spent on upgrades, and a check for $12,000. "I moved it back from the joint account," she said quietly. "It's yours, every penny." She hesitated, tears threatening again. I messed up. I looked at her for a long moment. This time, I didn't see a traitor. I saw a daughter who had gotten lost for a while, someone waking up. I took the check, folded it once, and slid it back toward her. "Thank you," I said softly, "but I don't need the money." She nodded, eyes shining. "Then let me earn it back." Something in my chest loosened. Brandon, he didn't fade quietly. He tried to go public, the way small men do when cornered. Posted a long rant on Facebook, accusing me of being abusive, senile, and emotionally manipulative. Within minutes, the comments started rolling in. "Didn't you show everyone a nursing home brochure at your wedding?" One guest wrote. "You literally joked about stealing the man's house. We were there," another said. "Pretty bold for someone living rent-free in your father-in-law's home," someone else added. The post vanished by morning. By the end of the week, his real estate hustle had dried up. Word travels fast in a city like Toledo. No one wants to trust a man who tried to con his own family. Deals slipped away. Partners ghosted him. He moved out on day 28 of the eviction clock, 2 days shy of legal action. Left behind a broken 1-200 espresso machine and a pair of empty protein tubs in the spare room. That was all? Me? I slept in my own bed for the first time in months. The mattress still held the faint imprint of years, the one I'd shared with my wife, the one Sophie used to climb into when storms scared her. Through the window, the backyard pear tree swayed in the night breeze, leaves whispering against the siding. I stared at it for a long time. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not anger, not victory, worth. The quiet was no longer heavy. It was whole. And for the first time in a long time, I slept like a man who remembered exactly who he was. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the envelope slid through the brass slot in my front door and landed with a soft thup on the welcome mat. I'd just come in from trimming the hedges, sweat on my neck, work gloves tucked into my back pocket. The house smelled faintly of cut grass and the lemon cleaner I'd used on the counters that morning. I bent down, picked up the envelope, and saw the return address, Lucas County Recorder's Office. My pulse jumped. I carried it to the kitchen table, the same one where I'd eaten 1,000 breakfasts with Sophie when she was little. My hands weren't shaking, but they felt heavier than usual as I slid a finger under the seal. Inside was a single official sheet, crisp, government gray, stamped, signed, sealed. Deed transfer recorded. No liens. Trust registered. I stared at the words until they stopped swimming. It was over. No loopholes. No back doors. No appeals. Brandon no longer had a claim. Not to my house. Not to my accounts. Not to a single blade of grass on the property I'd built with my bare, cracked hands. For a long moment, I just sat there, the paper flat on the table. Afternoon light slanted through the blinds, striping the page in gold. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked twice and went quiet. The fridge hummed steadily, the only sound in the room. But as the quiet stretched, I realized something. It wasn't enough. Not yet. Because people like Brandon, They don't learn from silence. They don't respect walls built in the dark. They need exposure. They need the mask ripped off in daylight. And I wasn't done. The chance came faster than I expected. Brandon had been trying to claw his way back into relevance online. It didn't surprise me. His ego needed an audience like a plant needs sunlight. A few acquaintances sent me screenshots. He was running ads now, posing in front of rented luxury cars and staged houses, selling a course called Build Wealth with Brandon. He promised to teach family optimization strategies, claimed he'd retired 2 parents early, said he knew how to leverage generational assets. He was using my story as his brand, my name, my house, my sacrifices. That was the moment my jaw locked. Quiet anger, the kind that doesn't burn out. I made a phone call. My lawyer, Sarah, answered on the second ring. Calm, capable voice I'd come to trust. Hey, Tom, what's up? I told her what I'd seen. Brandon twisting my life into his marketing. She listened, then sighed. We can draft a friendly cease and desist. Usually gets the message across. No, I said, surprising even myself with how steady it came out. No more friendly, no more private. A pause. Then, you want public? I want undeniable, I said. I want notarized humiliation. Sarah was quiet for a beat. Then I could almost hear the smile in her voice. All right, let's build a record. A week later, I walked into the modest front lobby of the Toledo Register. The bell over the door jingled. The place smelled like ink and dust and fresh coffee from a pot that had probably been running since dawn. A couple of desks sat cluttered with papers, screens glowing in the afternoon light. The editor, a wiry man with glasses perched low on his nose, looked up when I introduced myself. He recognized my last name. Small towns have long memories. What can we do for you, Mr. Morris? He asked. I placed a thick folder on his desk. It landed with a sound that made him raise his brows. Inside were the full property deed, stamped and filed, trust paperwork, airtight and witnessed, the certified eviction letter, screenshots of Brandon's wedding toast, him grinning while holding that nursing home brochure, a typed transcript of the audio where he called me a burden who'll be out by Christmas. The editor flipped through slowly. Each page made his expression shift. First curiosity, then a kind of respectful disbelief, then quiet anger on my behalf. This is solid, he said finally. Everything documented, I replied. Every word true. He sat back, tapped a pen against the desk. You mind if we run with this? Community loves a good underdog story. I just nodded. 2 Sundays later, the paper hit porches all over Lucas County. Front page of the community section, retired line worker, outsmarts would-be son-in-law, in cold real estate betrayal. They ran a photo of my hands holding the deed, scarred, calloused, still steady after decades on the line. Underneath, the story spelled out exactly what had happened, how a quiet dad protected what he'd built, how a would-be hustler underestimated him. By Monday, the piece was everywhere. Local newsletters picked it up. Regional TV stations linked to it online. Someone posted screenshots to Reddit. Father of the bride delivers legal revenge like a boss. Thousands of upvotes followed. Comments poured in. And by the end of the week, Brandon's shiny new wealth course had a 1-star rating. People shredded him. You got outplayed by a guy who reads paperbacks at Denny's. Real Estate 101. Don't steal from the man whose name is still on the deed. Tom from Toledo is my hero. I didn't write those comments, didn't need to. The truth had momentum now. I heard from a neighbor that Brandon tried to apply for a loan against another property a few towns over. But the paper trail and the gossip followed him like smoke. His name flagged in background checks like a flare against the night sky. No bank wanted to touch him. The man who bragged about leveraging assets couldn't leverage his own name anymore. Flashback. Years ago, my wife had just lost her job. Sophie was starting first grade. We had $112 left after paying rent groceries, and gas. I remember sitting at the kitchen table late at night, bills spread out like battlefield maps, my wife crying quietly beside me, the fridge humming, the air heavy with fear. I canceled the cable that night, took a night shift stocking shelves at Walmart after my full days at Ford, collected cash tips, spare change, and coupons in a battered Sears shoebox I kept hidden behind the cleaning supplies. We lived lean, real lean, but we made it through. No handouts, no scams. Just sweat, silence, survival. People like Brandon think men like me are soft. They see patience and mistake it for weakness. They don't understand that quiet isn't surrender. It's strategy. It's fuel. We don't break. We just go quiet and get to work. After the article dropped, my voicemail filled with 3 messages from Brandon. Each, one more frantic than the last. Look, man, you didn't have to take it this far. Next one came the following morning, voice ragged. Sophie and I are done. She moved in with a friend. Happy now? And the last, desperate and small. I get it. You won. Just maybe take the article down? I saved them all. Never called back. I was busy repainting the upstairs room, the one he'd turned into his office, his kingdom. The smell of fresh eggshell white filled the house. Sunlight came in clean through the window as I put my old tools back on the shelves where they belonged. I hung a photo above the window. Sophie at her college graduation, cap tipped back, smiling so wide it nearly split her face. That was before the noise, before the manipulation. For a long time I just stood there looking at that picture, roller still in hand. The house felt right again. Mine again. A month later, Sophie came back, not to move in, not yet, just to talk. It was a cool Saturday morning. Dew still clung to the grass. She knocked softly this time, like she wasn't sure she had the right. When I opened the door, she was holding 2 coffees, steam curling into the brisk air. "Hey, Dad," she said quietly. I stepped aside to let her in. We sat at the table, same spot where I'd read the recorder's letter weeks earlier. She looked around slowly, taking it in. The freshly painted walls, the tools back in place, the photo of her smiling down from the upstairs window. "I want to add you back to my emergency contact forms," she said, voice trembling just enough. I nodded. Didn't need words. She set one of the coffees in front of me and glanced down at her lap. "I was blind, Dad. I'm sorry it took this much." For a second my throat felt tight, but I stayed quiet. Let the weight of it hang. I didn't tell her I forgave her. Not yet. Forgiveness isn't cheap, but I did offer something better. A second chance. A path back. Some wounds need proof of healing, not just apologies. Brandon, though, he tried one more time to reinvent himself. Launched a YouTube channel called Real Estate Recovery. Slick thumbnails, forced smiles. Promised to teach how to bounce back from bad deals. But the internet has a long memory. Every video's comment section filled with links to the article. Screenshots of the wedding toast. Quotes from the eviction letter. People calling him out before he could finish a sentence. Every attempt sank under the weight of documented truth. Eventually, he disappeared. Moved to some small town in Indiana, according to a mutual acquaintance. Changed his profile picture. Started telling strangers he used to be big in Ohio. But no matter where he went, he knew one thing. There's a man in Toledo who still has the receipts. All of them, tucked neatly in a labeled folder. On the spine, written in black marker, 3 simple words. When they forget who I am. It's been 5 months since the wedding. Brandon's name hasn't crossed my lips once. Not out loud, anyway. Sometimes it drifts through my head when I'm sanding a piece of trim or brewing coffee, but only like a faint echo. It has no weight now, no power. His forwarding address showed up in my mailbox not long after the eviction deadline passed. A thin white envelope, typed neatly. Brandon Keller, Unit 312, Cross Creek Apartments, I-69, Indiana. I didn't even open it, didn't let my hands linger. I slid it across the counter to my lawyer the next time we met, just for the record. Paperwork, a name on a page, nothing more. Then I let it leave my mind. He's not my problem anymore. What he stole, he couldn't keep. What he wanted, he never earned. What he shattered wasn't his to rebuild. That's the thing people like him never understand. You can grab, you can manipulate, you can swagger and lie, but the weight of something built on sweat and sacrifice, it can't be stolen. It lives in the hands that built it, in the memory of why it was built at all. Sophie visits on Sundays now. The first Sunday after everything's settled, I wasn't sure if she'd come. But just before noon, I heard tires crunching on the gravel drive. She stepped out of her car holding 2 grocery bags and a paper sack from the bakery on Monroe Street. She didn't knock, just let herself in the way she used to when she was a teenager. Since then, it's become a quiet ritual. Every Sunday. Sometimes she brings soup. Sometimes that sourdough she knows I like. Sometimes just herself and a shy smile. We don't talk about Brandon, not because the subject is forbidden, because he's been erased, scrubbed clean from the story of this house. Instead, we talk about Mom. Sophie asks about little things, what perfume she wore, how she used to hum while cooking, whether she'd have liked the paint color in the kitchen. I tell her yes, her mom would have loved it. She always liked warm colors. We talk about movies, the old black and white ones her mom loved. We talk about work and life and how things feel different when you know who really has your back. One chilly afternoon, she helped me rehang the porch swing, the same swing Brandon had once removed, saying it hurt curb appeal. We sanded the arms smooth, stained it fresh, and hung it back on its chains. When we were done, we sat together, rocking gently, listening to the creak of the lynx and the birds in the maple trees. There's peace again, not the soft, forgetful kind, the earned kind, the kind that comes after a storm when you've put your house back together with your own hands. A few weeks ago, as the sun dropped behind the cottonwoods, Sophie sat down on the back steps. I was cleaning paintbrushes at the outdoor spigot. She hugged her knees to her chest, silent for a while. "You know," she said finally, voice small, "for a while I really believed him." I stopped rinsing and looked up. "He made everything sound so logical," she continued, "like taking care of you financially was this burden we had to solve. Like loving you meant planning your exit." Her eyes shimmered in the dusk. Shame sat heavy on her face. I just shook my head slowly. "I didn't raise you to carry me," I said. "I raised you to stand beside me." She covered her mouth, started to cry. Quiet, shaking sobs, nothing dramatic, just grief leaking out. I let her, didn't rush to fix it. Sometimes love sounds like letting someone cry without interruption. When she was done, she nodded, wiped her eyes with her sleeve, and whispered, "Thanks, Dad." I didn't say you're forgiven. Words like that can feel too easy. But I rested a hand on her shoulder. She leaned against it, and it was enough. A week later, I did something I hadn't done in years. I framed the article, the one the Toledo Register ran. Retired line worker outsmarts would-be son-in-law in cold real estate betrayal. I put it behind glass and hung it in the garage, above my old pegboard, right beside the shadow box that holds my first Ford employee ID. Beside my wife's last letter, the one she wrote when she knew the end was close, telling me to keep building a life for Sophie. Beside the tiny cement handprint Sophie made in preschool that still says, "Daddy's girl" in childish paint. It's not about gloating, it's not about revenge. It's a reminder that even a quiet man, steady, overlooked, underestimated when pushed too far, can flip the entire story. Behind my property, there's a gravel road, always been there, just a skinny stretch along the Mahomet riverbank. Doesn't lead anywhere special, just curves past tall grass and cottonwoods and ends in a clearing where you can hear the water if the wind is right. For years I stopped driving it. Life got busy, then heavy, then too full of other people's noise. Lately, I've started again. I climb into my old Ford, the seat molded to decades of work and road trips and late-night rescues. I roll the windows down, rest my arm on the sill, and let the wind slap against my forearm until it stings in a good way. Gravel crunches under the tires. Dust billows behind me, drifting back into memory. The truck still runs strong. So do I. Sometimes Sophie comes along. She leans her head against the seat, hair blowing wild, eyes half closed in the breeze. Sometimes we don't talk at all, and that's fine. Silence doesn't scare me anymore. We earned it. Sometimes I drive alone. Just me, the hum of the engine and the sound of the river sliding by. Either way, I don't carry bitterness on that road, only proof. Proof that peace isn't something handed to you. It's something you guard, with boundaries, with paperwork, with backbone when it's required. Proof that no matter who tries to rewrite your story, you can take the pen back. And proof that the road, the one you paved with sacrifice, love, and long nights, will always belong to the one who never stopped driving. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.